this it? Our hero humbles himself and is exalted to a name above every name. That's it? No application for ourselves, just a nice little story. Good, we know it now, and we move on? Paul doesn't think so. Paul thinks this impacts our life directly. He says this, have this mind among yourself, which is yours in Christ Jesus. He wants us to have the same mind as Christ. What mind was that? Remember, Christ made himself no big deal. That's the same mind we're supposed to have. Remember how he did that? First, he was a servant. Jesus told his own disciples this when he washed their feet. As I have done, you go and do likewise. This isn't necessarily about washing feet, but about being a servant to others, especially in ways that nobody else wants to serve. This is difficult for me. This doesn't come easy. This goes against everything that we know as people and looking out for ourselves. Jesus put flesh on. Remember, he was a real person. He laughed, he cried, he hurt, he let people touch him, he talked to people, he talked to kings, he talked to lowly. He was a real person. Are we a real person to people? Do we put on this front, this persona, where we don't want to let people in and to see who we really are beneath the surface? He was obedient. Don't have to go into this one too much because I think that we all get it. Even if you're not been in church, you get it. Obedient. Jesus was obedient. Are we being obedient? Are we making ourselves no big deal by being obedient? And he made himself no big deal by going to death. Jesus said this about those who follow him, that you can't until you take up your cross. Paul said this about himself to another group of believers that he wrote to. I am crucified in Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. It's not about losing our identity. It's about dying to the disobedience that we just talked about. And when we die to that, we find out who we really are in Christ and the power that we can have in Christ. Now notice this. Notice this what he said. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours, in Christ Jesus. We can't even have this mind unless we're in Christ Jesus. And how do we do that? Remember yesterday? We bow our knee and confess. Yes, I know it might be difficult for you who think God is egotistical, but consider this. We cannot have this mind until we make ourselves no big deal before God. But remember, he's the most humble person ever. We like our leaders to be that. God is that. And imagine a group of people living no big deal lives, what that would look like. Paul says this. This is how it would look like. That in humility you'd count others more significant than ourselves. That we wouldn't only look out to our interest, but we would look out for the interests of others. A group of people doing this. Imagine if you did this and people left your presence saying, he thinks that I'm more significant than him. And he really wants my interest to be met, not his own. And imagine a group of people living like that and how that could impact and transform a community. If you have more questions about this, I want to answer them. If you have thoughts about Philippians or questions about Philippians, I want to get together with you and talk about that. Let me know. Comment, email me, send me a message, Facebook or Twitter, and let me know. Thank you for hanging with us this week and looking at Jesus, the most humble man ever.